Hello guys, welcome back to Horror's Lab YouTube channel. In today's episode, we're going to be exploring the concept of error handling. Now, when you're building robust Cairo programming applications, right, you're going to encounter scenarios where you want to handle unexpected cases like errors, right? Now, we looked at the results in the last episode when we looked at generic types, right, and we talked about how the result in norms used like generic types and how we can use it for like error handling. Now we're going to be looking into how to use this in details in this particular episode. Now, if you're just joining us, I would advise you go back to check other episodes so you can follow easily, like full effectively with this particular one. And without further ado, let's get started. When writing programming applications in Cairo, right, there are like certain actions. It could be like invoking a function or whatever it is, right, that you probably did that resulted in some sort of runtime error. Now, this is what we refer to as like the program panicked, right? And like I said, you can do this in different ways. For example, you can do this by, let's say, trying to access an index of an array that doesn't really exist, right? So you're trying to access an array that are an array of length, let's say 5, and you're trying to access an index of 7. Now that in itself is going to like panic, is going to throw a runtime error. The same thing too, you can actually like you can actually invoke panics, right, by using some functions which are available to us like in the core library. So let's dive into our code editor and see how we can do this. All right, now I'm back in our code editor, and as is our culture, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to come here and we're going to say BAC 11. All right, and we're going to call this error handling. All right, so now I'm going to come in here. Let me save this. I'm going to come here and scab new, and I'm just going to call this chapter errors. All right, and Cairo tests. Okay, so we're good. Now I'm back in here, and you should see. Let's close this. We should see this error. So we're just going to rename this and call this BAC 11. Okay, so call that BAC 11. Now we're going to go into that. I'm just going to clear all this from like the previous episode, and I'm going to clear this terminal. All right, so back in BAC 11, and in the lead.cairo, I'm going to clear this too. Now I mentioned, or I talked about how you can actually like invoke runtime errors, right? You can cause panic situations using like some key stuff from the core library. So we're going to be looking at 3 respective ways to do that. We're going to be looking at like the panic method. We're going to be looking at the panic with failed 252 method, and we're going to be looking at like the panic macro. All right, so I'm just going to create a main function, and I'm going to create a main function. Now, the first thing we're going to be looking at is like the panic method, right? Now, the panic function is like, it's like a method like available to us from the core library, right, that can enable you cause panics. Now, this particular method like receives an array which you can actually pass in, like an array of arguments, right, which you can actually pass in to like explain the error better. Now, let's see how we would want to like use the panic method. So first off, I'm going to create an array, and I'm going to call that array data, right? And data is going to give us it's going to be an array, and it's going to give us information on why this panicked, right? So I'm just going to call this call panicked, right? I'm just going to say the call panicked. Now we can now do something as simple as this: call the panic method and just pass in data. And that's all we need to do. Now, if we try to run this is going to panic with this particular error. So let's try it. So I'm just going to come in here and I'm going to run scab Cairo. Oh, sorry. So first of all, we have to CD. We're going to need CD into BC 11. I'm going to clear this, and we're going to do scab Cairo run. All right, so you can see it panics with like this error which says call panicked. Now, but how we created this panic, right, might have seemed a little stressful because is there really a need to actually like create an array of data before you're able to like call the panic method? If you're just looking to like panic with, let's say, a failed 252 value or something, right? Just a simple error message. The core library also provides us with another method called like the panic with failed 250s method. But to actually use that, we have to first like import it. So I'm just going to come here and I'm going to say, let's use from the core library, the panic with failed 252 method. So this is it. All right. So now with this, I'm just going to like, because we're going to panic. This is going to make our code unreachable. So I'm just going to comment that. Now here, I'm going to say, I want to panic with a failed 252 value. And I'm just going to do the same thing, right? Just say call panicked. Now you can see how simpler and easier this particular method is to use, right? So if I run this, I'm going to get the error that says call panicked, as you can see, but I didn't really need to do all the initial stuff I did with like creating an array and stuff. Now, something else you can actually also do, which is easier, right, is using like the panic macro. And you'd especially want to use the panic macro for the special reason, for basically for the reason that it takes in like, you can take in a byte array, basically like values which are greater than like the 31 bytes, right, which 31 characters you're limited to with like a failed 252 value. So to use the panic macro, I'm going to just comment this particular one out, and I'm going to come here, and it's very simple, just the way you create macros, right? Use the panic and use that exclamation mark, and I can pass in like a very long value. I'm going to say, I want this to panic with a value which is greater than 31 characters. All right. So if you had tried this with the panic fails 252, you're going to run into an error. But now if we try this with the panic macro, and I clear this and I just run this, so you're going to ignore the warning. So you can see our call actually panics with a byte array. So basically it's the text we passed in, right, is broken down into like smaller pieces, but you can actually like see the full error here. So that's how you can actually like create like panic situations. Now there are also going to be some unique cases, right, where you have functions that should never really panic, and you can actually mark them or tell the compiler that this particular function is not really going to panic. And how you do that essentially is using like the no panic function. And I'm going to create a function. I'm just going to call this, right, function should never panic, right? And this function is just going to return like I want it to return a failed 252. Now I'm going to pass in like a value here. I'm going to say I want it not to panic. So I do that using like the no panic attribute. Now when I do this, right, I can just simply like return any value. Let's say I just I return a value called maybe 100 or something, right? Now if we try to call this function, it's going to run without issues. So let's say I come here and call function should never panic. All right, so that returns a value. So let's just ignore that for now. So if I clear this, and I run that, we're going to like, so we get unreachable code. That's because we tried to panic here earlier. So I have to close that. All right, now I'm going to clear and I'm going to run again. All right, and as you can see, the function runs successfully, right? It doesn't really panic. And but something you need to take note of when using like the no panic keyword, right, is you can only use it in situations where you are sure like that function or the logic contained therein is never really going to panic. So you can use it with situations that might panic. For example, let's say try to use it like with the assert or the assert macro. So I want to say assert that 100 is equal to 100, right? You can't maybe say, okay, maybe just do like an error is simple. So you can use it in cases like this, right? Because you just have to return something at the end for this too. All right, so let's see. All right, so you can see we get this error that says function is declared as no panic but calls a function that may panic. So in cases where like things might actually panic, right? You can't use like the no panic keyword. So you use it for cases where you're sure that this function or this stuff, right, is never really going to panic. So that's essentially how you can actually play around with like unrecoverable panics in like Cairo. So let's head back into our Cairo book and see if there's anything we're missing out before we take our quiz and head into the next subchapter. All right. So back in our Cairo book, we already looked at the panic macro, the no panic notation. Yeah, okay, one more thing, right? So there's the panic with attributes. Now, this is a very interesting one. You might really not use this one very frequently, but essentially all it does, right, is you create a function, you mark it like with the panic with attributes, which as you can see is this, right? Then you're going to pass in like, I think of it as like some sort of like a alternative or callback function, or basically like a wrapper, right? And you're going to say, okay, if like it panics with like you're trying to say if like what's it called, the function you're calling returns like basically what happens is anytime like the function returns like a none or the error, right, you can give it like a custom value like you can panic with. So as you can see in this case, we have like the wrap if not zero, and we want it to panic with this value, this error here, value is zero, anytime like it returns like a none or a some value. So let's try this out and see how it would look like. So if I go back into my code editor and I'm going to clear this. Let's clear this. And I'm going to create another function. So I'm going to call this just like the example wrap if not zero. Right, and it's going to take in a value which is like a int 128. So it's going to take in a value which is like a int 128, and I want it to return like an option, which is going to be of like into 128. All right. So, and all we're doing, right, is we're checking, okay, if value is equal to zero, what do we want to return? We're just simply going to return option none, right? And we're going to do like a simple else. So else, right? We just want to return like the option sum, and we're just simply going to, which is going to basically just be the value. Now, in this case, we can mark it with the attribute, which is like the panic with attribute. And just so this is the error, right? So the custom error wants to return anytime that this function evaluates to like a none, or like basically a none or like an error. So the none from the option and the error from like the results, right? So I can call this, okay, wrap not zero. Now, what's going to happen, right, is anytime we call this function, if we use like this wrapper here and we pass in a value, if this function, the function logic itself is wrapping around, right, returns a non-value and error value, it's going to return like the custom error here. So I'm just going to simply come here and I'm going to call, I'm going to call wrap not zero, and I'm just going to pass in the value 0. So if we try to run this, you see we get the error which says value is 0. But you try to run the main function in itself, you're probably really not going to like what's it called? You're probably really not going to get anything. So essentially the wrapper function serves as it means to like this existing error, but like I said, the requirements, right, it must satisfy is that the return value must actually either be of like option type none, or like of the result type error, or the error variant in the results. All right, so let's head back into our Cairo book and finally just take our quiz before we move into the next subchapter. All right, so now we're going to start our quiz. The first question says, which line of code is correct to return the error code to and the error message? This is the error message. So this goes called panic with your 252. So this is the error message. No, panic array. Okay, 2, this is the error message. Then we have this panic array 2, this is the error message. Finally, we have this panic 2, this is the error message. So this is going to be the answer, because when you're creating an array, essentially once passing like if else to 52 values, the panic macro does not really accept an array. So this won't work. This won't work too, because you're passing a byte array here, and this will also not work because it's supposed to take like a single file to 52 value. All right. So the next question: which of the following is not a good reason to use a panic? The program should stop executing as soon as possible. The program is about to perform a dangerous operation. The program has reached an unrecoverable error state. The program has reached an error state which should be communicated to a caller function. This should be the answer. So errors are usually not used to communicate stops to like the caller, or you can use it when you want to stop the program from executing, maybe to prevent a dangerous operation, or if it has reached an unrecoverable error state. For example, when you try to access an index that does not exist in an array. All right, so the next question: which of the following programs will not cause a runtime panic? So we have this main function, if true, panic to or print line. Okay, we have this other one, let array equals array this, let's index this. So we already know this is going to cause a panic. You're trying to access an index that does not exist. And it says not. So this causes a panic. So there's if true panic 2, this causes a panic. Now this, we're trying to access index 3, and then we're matching on it and we're doing this. So it says which of the following programs will not cause a runtime panic? So that's going to be program 3. Program 3 won't cause a runtime panic. Finally, what is the purpose of the panic with attributes on Cairo? So we already this was the last thing we looked at. So you're going to use it to create a wrapper function that panics if the annotated function returns option none or results error. So that's our answer. All right, so we got the 4 answers correctly. Okay, and so with that, I'll see you like in the next subchapter. All right, so in this next subchapter, we're going to be taking a look at how recoverable errors with result works. Now, when you're writing or building programs, right, it's not every single time where like you panic, like you encounter a panic or a runtime error, right, that you want like let's say your program to stop entirely. Oftentimes the what's causing or the error you're getting or whatever is causing your program to like to panic, right, is something you can easily like predict and probably interpret and try to respond to, right? And you do not want like the whole program execution flow to just stop just because you encountered an error. Now in those cases, that's where like the results in shines. Now we looked at the results in when we looked at generic data types, and we talked about how we had 2 variants, as you can see from here, the OK variant and the error variant. The OK has the type T and the error has like the type E. The OK is returned anytime like there's a success in like your program execution or whatever it is, right? And the error is returned anytime like the program like panics or encounters like an error, right? And basically this enum is what you would use in cases where you want to implement some sort of like recoverable error. Now, behind the hood, how this works, right, is this is implemented over like the results tree. And the results tree has like this functions that you would have to keep in mind, because that's where you're probably mostly going to like basically the functions you're going or methods you're going to be interacting it when you're using like the results So first of all, like there's the expects. So I'm going to group like this traits, right? Because we have to understand how these traits work in order to like understand what we're going to do next time we dive into our code editor. So we're going to be grouping like we're going to be grouping these traits. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We're going to be grouping them into 3 categories. Now we have the expect and the unwrap, which like behave similarly in that they return like what's it called, this type T, which is basically what you get when you run into like the OK variant, right? And we have like the expect error and the unwrap error, which returns the type E, which is the error variant, right? And we have the is okay and the is error that returns the bold type. Now, the expect and the unwrap, like I said, they are similar in the sense that they like what's it called? They return like the T type, which is like for when it's when there's a success with your program, right? But The difference between both of them is when you use the expect, you can pass in like a custom error. So you're saying, okay, I'm expecting that this program should succeed, right? If it succeeds, I want to return the T type, right? But in the case where it doesn't succeed, you can actually pass in like a custom error you want like your program to panic with. But for the unwrap, if like this program in itself does not really succeed, it panics with like a pre-written error, like some sort of default error. But the problem is that will probably not give a lot of context to like give a lot of context as to why this error happened, right? And so that's just the major problem or the major differences between both. So when you use expect, we're expecting it to succeed, but if it doesn't succeed, here's a custom error you can actually use. Now, the second set behaves similar, should I say, similarly opposite to the first. So first off, we are in this case like expecting an error, so we're returning an error. So we expect in this case that our result enum is going to be around the error variant. Now, if like just like the first, right, the difference between the expect error and the unwrap error, right, is if the expect error in itself runs into or for some reasons like succeeds and it comes into the OK variant, right, you're allowed to pass in like a custom error you want to panic with. So you probably want to panic with something like, oh, this program was supposed to fail, but here's like this it didn't fail, so here's an error explaining like why this program like probably didn't fail or something, right? So the same thing, but for the unwrap error, right, you cannot panic with a custom error. So you panic with like the default error. So if for some reasons it was expecting an error and it got like something in the OK variant, it's just going to return like a default error. So it's panic with a default error. Then we have the last three is okay and is error. Now the is okay and this error, they basically like evaluates to like a boolean value, right? Is okay checks, okay, is this like around the okay variant? Does it return the T type? If it does, it returns true. But if it doesn't, if it's an error or it's in the error variant, it returns false. The is error does the opposite. So if it's in the OK variant, it returns false. If it's in the error variant, it returns true. So you're essentially just using this to check if like your results enum is in the OK variant, and you're using this to check if like your results enum is like in the error variant. So that's just the difference. And something else you might notice also is like they both implement like the drop traits, which if you remember, it was implemented using this plus, which is what we called an anonymous operator. If you don't understand how this works, go back to check like the previous episode. All right. So, without further ado, let's just dive into our code editor, right? And basically play around with these things. Let's see how we can actually like use the results and to probably predict an error or something and respond accordingly. All right, so I'm just going to go into my code editor and I commented this out. So I'm going to like comment it when I push it to like GitHub so you can have access to that. But I'm just going to create another file so we don't like we don't mess that up. I'm going to call this recoverable. I'm just going to call it recoverable.cairo. So I want to add this. I'm just going to add this to the top of it. Remember, little.cairo is our entry point, and I want this to be accessible. So I'm just going to do all recoverable. So this is the compiler can see this, and we can do scap Cairo and whatnot. All right. So you can also say I commented everything out in the main function, so nothing immediately dot Cairo will run. All right. Now back in our recoverable.cairo, and what we're going to do right now, right, is we're going to write a simple function. Now, what we want from this our function, right, is we want our function to take in a unit its value and try to convert it. Now, if the conversion is successful, we want to return like the new value. And basically, we're taking a field 252 value and we're trying to convert it to a unit 8 value. So if the conversion is successful, it falls within like the limits of like unit 8 value, right? It's going to of course be successful and we're going to get the value. If not, we're going to like get an error that says invalid integer. So I'm going to write the function. I'm going to call this function. Let's call it pass unit 8, right? And what it takes in it like if it's 252 value. So I'm just going to call this value, and value is going to take in like it's going to be like of the type field 252. Now, like I said, it's going to return a result enum. So if it's in the OK variant, we're going to basically return like a unit 8, right? Which is like the value, the converted value. But if it is not in the OK variant, then we're going to just return like if it's 252, which is basically going to be like the error we want to return. All right. I'm going to use a match statement. Once again, if you do not understand how the match statements work, then you might have to check like about 3, 4 episodes back where we looked at norms to understand how like the match flow construct works. Now we want to match on the value dot trying to. Now we also talked about converting from one data type to another where we looked at into and we looked at trying to, right? And now we're trying to convert into use trying to most types where there's a possibility of like the conversion failing. So in this case, like we said, we're trying to convert a failed 252 value to a unit 8, but not all failed 252 values can fit into a unit 8. So there's a potential that this might fail. And if it fails, it's going to return the result error, right? And that's why we're going to use the trying to. So valid or trying to want to match on that. Now, once we do that, we want to account. Remember, for with the man when you're matching on something, right? You have to account for like all the possible options. So the first option we want to like account for, right, is if the conversion is successful at a returned like a value. So essentially, if like we try to convert and it's successful, it's going to return the option enorm with like the value, right, of the some variant with the value. So if this happens, what we're simply going to do is we're going to return the OK variant of the result enum in this case, passing in like the value. So that's the first thing. Now, the second thing we're going to account for, like I said, with match flow construct, to always want to account for every single hour. The second thing we want to account for, right, is if there's no value. Now, when it returns option none is when the conversion failed, right? So when the conversion failed, we're going to get return the option none. Now, when this happens, what do we want to do? So we're just simply going to return this time around uh the error variant of like our result and we're just remember it takes an field 252, so we're just going to say this is an invalid integer. And yeah, so I'm just going to close this, right? And with that, we just oh sorry, I forgot this returns this result, right? So we can't use like the semicolon to terminate it. All right. So with this now, we've just simply used the result in to predict what's it called? A situation where this function might fail and those like try to like implement some sort of or some form of callback fallback. All right. Now if we can actually write the right test to see how this would behave, right? And this is something I would prefer not to do, considering we are yet to look at how to write this for your Cairo program. We're going to definitely like try to cover this in like the next episode. But let's just try to write like a simple test to try this out. So when you're writing a test within like your Cairo program, like the same place your Cairo program, right? You want to probably use like this CFG attribute, and we're going to that's basically how we tell the compiler, okay, whatever is going to come below this, right, or whatever module is coming below this is like a test. So I'm going to call this mod test, and what we want to do is we're going to have to want to use like this function L of up, like the function above, right? We want to actually use that. Now, when you're writing tests, you actually specify you write tests in Cairo for tests in Cairo, right? Just the way you write like normal functions and methods. Or the one thing you have to take note of, right, is you have to specify this test attribute. So that's how you tell the compiler, okay, this function, this method, whatever it is, right, is actually like a test function. So we want to test. We need to start with the test, and we're going to say we want to test that the field 252 to U8 is let's say successful. All right. So I'm just going to close this and I'm going to open it. Now we're just going to do something very simple. So we're going to probably create a value, which is going to be field 252 value. Now we can give it like just a very small value, let's say 7, right? Because we know that that should fit into like a unit 8. So, and I'm just going to call what's it called? The pass unit 8 method, which we imported earlier, and we're just simply going to pass in the value. Now, when we do this right, we can, if we just close this in here, we're simply going to get the result. And if we want to like unwrap the value, just like I explained earlier, right, we can actually use like the unwrap to unwrap it. And if we get like the success variant, what's it going to do? It's just going to return like the T type. But if we run into an error, it's going to like what's it called? It's going to panic with like the default error. All right, so we just wrote a simple test to check if this will be successful. So let's try to run it. Now, how you basically like run scap test, I'm just going to let me add another score here. So I'll prevent those errors. Now I'm going to clear my terminal, and then how you run scap the Cairo tests, right? Is if you're using scap, you can just do that using like the scap test command. Now we do that, and you can see our test ran and the results were successful. So we had one test pass and the result is okay. So, but remember he had two cases, right? There was also the point where it could have like panicked with this value, invalid integer, and we want to really account for that. So how do we do that? So in Cairo tests, we have an attribute you can actually use called the should panic. So we can actually use the should panic to like tell compiler that okay, we expect that this particular test should panic, and only if it panics that the test will pass successfully. If it doesn't panic, then the test will fail. All right, and we want to say okay, the test that failed 252 to unit 8 is unsuccessful. All right, now I'm going to create another value which is going to be filled 252, and I'm just going to use a very large number that I know that won't fit in. All right, and I'm going to do something similar to what we did earlier. I'm going to try to pass this value in, and just maybe unwrap whatever we get. That's then needs the semicolon. All right, so this test would only succeed, right? Like I said, if this function panics. So let's see if it's going to panic. All right, so I'm going to just need to clear this out, and I'm going to run this cap test again. And as you can see, we also got this to work, right? So we got our two test passing, and that's because we had this root panic. So if you had removed this and you tried to run that, you see we're going to get the second, going to have the second test failing because it was supposed to panic. So you can see it panicked with this particular error. So that's just exactly how you write tests in Cairo. But of course, like I said, we're going to like look into that in details when we get into like the next episode where we're going to look into testing Cairo programs. All right, so let's head back into our Cairo book and see if we are missing out on anything. All right, so now back into our Cairo book. We already looked at the results traits. We already did a simple example, right? So one more thing before we call it a day, right, is the question mark operator. So basically this operator is like a very interesting one, right? You use it like for concise error handling. So all those things we did where we had to probably to like dot unwrap and all those things, right? You can actually like handle those kind of situations implicitly by using like the question mark operator. And when you do that, essentially you're essentially saying, okay, this is handled implicitly. I would let like the calling function or basically the function calling that particular method or whatever is supposed to return the results and right. I'm going to let you to like deal with the errors you get like yourself, something like that. So let's hop into like the code editor and see how we can actually like play around with that. All right, now so back in our code editor, I'm going to create another function, right? And I'm just going to it's going to be okay. So we're going to replicate something similar to what they have in the Cairo book, right? So just going to say, okay, want to do something with the pass unit 8 function. And this should not take in any value. All right, so we want to do something with this particular value. Okay. And all right, so we're just going to let's give it an input. So we're going to give it an input, which is like a failed 252 value. And just like what was returned earlier, we want to return the same thing, right? The result and the unit 8 type and the failed 252. Okay, so we want to return this, all right? You can see we already have errors. So what do we want to do exactly? So we want to try to convert this our inputs to yield it. And the way we can basically do that is we're going to call our function in this case, which is the pass unit 8 function. And we're going to just pass in our input. Now, initially, the way we did this right was when we are done, we called the unwrap or the dot unwrap method. But in this case, we're going to use, like I said, the question mark operator we talked about earlier. And the way we're going to do it right is we're going to come here. We're going to just do this. Now, when we do something like this, like I said, we actually say, oh, let's handle this error implicitly and the calling function, like in this case, which is just something we take care of every other thing, right? So, I'm going to terminate this, right? And we're still getting an error. Oh, right. That's because this expects a result enough. So we have to return that. All right. So I'm just going to say let results be equal to this input to unit 8, right? Minus 1. And I'm going to return the OK variant, so it's the result. Oh, sorry. So, or returning something, so we can't terminate with a colon, with a semicolon. And just like that, this does something similar to what you would have gotten right if you probably came here to do something like calling the dot unwrap or dot expect error or whatever it is, right? And that's how essentially you can use like the question mark operator. I don't know if like there's a better name for that. All right, so but let's go back into our career book and probably take our tests before we go. Okay, so on this, I don't think there's any better name. I can't find one here, so I'll just cover that the question mark operator. Yeah, so we already looked into, so for the summary, we already looked into recoverable errors using the results in known. We looked at how we had two variants, the OK and the error type, and yeah, and I think that's about it. Right, so let's take our quiz and we'll call it the D. Okay, so let's consider this function that performs a division between two options. This, why do we want it to return a result instead of an option? So this is a division. So it takes in left hand side, right hand side, and it matches on the left hand side. So if it has a value, we want to match on the right hand side. Then if it has a value, if the value is 0, we want to return the error that if we saw is 0, else we return the value of the dividend what if we saw. Then we have, if it's none, we just want to return like the divisor is none, right? And finally, if left, this is also none, we want to return dividend is none. All right. So the question is, why do we want to return a result instead of an option? Let's see the responses. So first, this is because result represents the possibility of failure, while option cannot represent failures. So because result can represent why an operation failed, the division can fail for many reasons. Example, either at least one operand is not, divisor is 0. So just looking at that already, I think we already have our answer. Because like I said, using this error, the error variant, right, we can at least specify why this is failing. So you can see like the custom error in this case, which is divisor is 0, divisor is none. So we can represent the reason why, if for example, this function fails, the reason why it failed. So this should be our answer. The next is determine whether the program will pass the compiler. If it passes, write the expected output of the program. All right. So once again, left hand side, right hand side, we match through it. If the result is equal 0, this. They were calling try division by 0. So it says let dividend equals option sum 10, let divisor equals option sum 0, let result equals dividend divisor, then we're returning that. All right, let's see. The question is, will this Program compile. No, I don't think it will not compile. This program will not compile. All right. So the next is given an arbitrary expression of E of type result TE, which code snippets best represent how E is translated. So result TE, an arbitrary expression E. If let result error E equals E, return result no. Match E result okay V result error return error result error E. Here we have our answer. All right, so I'm just going to submit that. And we got our three answers correctly. Hope you did. So you attempted before I did. All right, so with that, we've come to like the end of this particular episode. In the next episode, we're going to be looking at how you can write Cairo tests for your programs. And of course, if you haven't done that, I will pleading, please like, subscribe, and share the video with someone who is interested in learning the Cairo programming language. And once again, I'll see you in the next one. To take care.